August the 12th, 2026. 2:11 in the afternoon, west coast of Iceland. A fishing captain looks up from his nets because the gulls have gone silent. Not flown off. Silent, mid-wing beat, frozen in the air, like something told them to stop. The temperature drops 11 degrees in under 3 minutes. And then the sun, the one thing that has never, in his entire life, failed to rise, goes out. Not sets, not clouds over. Goes out, the way a hand closes over a candle. For 2 minutes and 18 seconds, the middle of the day becomes the middle of the night. Every dog on that coastline starts howling, all of them, at the same second, in the same direction. He doesn't know that 1,400 miles south, in Ankara, 32 nations just finished signing a war pact under a sky that hasn't gone dark yet. He doesn't know the two events are connected. You're about to? Let's deal with the facts first, not the interpretation. The facts. On August 12, 2026, the moon passes directly between the Earth and the sun, and for a narrow band of the planet, day becomes night. This is not a metaphor. It is Newtonian mechanics, predicted centuries in advance, down to the second. Astronomers have known the exact geographic path of this shadow since before most of the people watching it were born. There is nothing mystical about the mechanism. But look at the path itself. Because the path is the story. The eclipse begins at sunrise over the Taimyr Peninsula, one of the most desolate stretches of Siberian Russia. A place with almost no permanent population, where the shadow touches down on frozen tundra and nobody is there to see it start. Then it does something most eclipses don't do. Instead of racing west to east across the middle of the globe, the way these events usually behave, this one arcs up and over the North Pole itself. It loops across the top of the world like a hand drawn slowly over a globe in a war room. And it comes down again on the ice cap of eastern Greenland. From there, it crosses open ocean, and it makes landfall a second time on the western edge of Iceland, clipping the coast where our fisherman is standing. Then it crosses the North Atlantic one more time and makes its final landfall in northern Spain, cutting the entire peninsula in half from the Bay of Biscay down to the Mediterranean, before brushing a sliver of Portugal and ending at sea. Total duration of the deepest darkness. 2 minutes and 18 seconds. That's the maximum. In most places along the path, less. Think about what that path actually connects. It starts on a peninsula so remote that Russia doesn't bother to station anyone there. It ends on the streets of Zaragoza and Valencia, cities with subway systems, stock exchanges, cathedrals 800 years old, millions of people who will step outside on their lunch break and watch the sky do something they have never seen it do. Between those 2 points, there is almost nothing. Ice, ocean, a handful of fishing towns, and then, all at once, modern Europe. Cruise lines have been selling tickets to this eclipse for 2 years. Astronomy tour groups booked hotel rooms in Reykjavik and northern Spain before some of you knew the year 2026 existed. There are eclipse chasers on every continent who have built their entire calendar around being in exactly the right field outside Burgos at exactly 2:11 in the afternoon. This is, by every measure, one of the most anticipated and publicized celestial events of the decade. Nobody had to go looking for this one. It found the front page on its own. Here's the detail that should stop you. This is the first total solar eclipse to cross mainland Europe since August 11th, 1999. 27 years. An entire generation has grown up in Europe, having never once stood under a sky gone completely black in the middle of the day. The last time it happened, the continent was 3 months from the turn of a millennium, and half the Western world was quietly bracing for something. Y2K, the end of an era, the sense that the clock itself might break. It didn't. But the fear was real, and it was global. And it happened under the same kind of sky we are about to get again. Now here is the second detail. And this one has nothing to do with astronomy and everything to do with the calendar most people in the West have forgotten how to read. August 12, 2026 falls 2 days before Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the Hebrew month of Elul, which lands that year on August 14th. Elul is not a random month on a Jewish calendar most Americans have never opened. Elul is the month of preparation. It is the 40 days that lead directly into Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, and then into Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the most solemn reckoning on the entire biblical calendar. Elul, in Jewish tradition, is when the king is said to be in the field, approachable, before the courtroom of the fall feasts opens, which means the sun goes dark in the final hours of Av, the month that already carries Tisha B'Av, the day both temples fell, and the sky clears again, just as the season of repentance begins. You can call that a coincidence. Astronomers will tell you correctly that eclipses follow a mathematical cycle called the Saros series, and that this exact geometry was locked in place long before anyone alive was born. That part is true. Nobody is claiming the moon moved on purpose. But somebody wrote something down a long time ago about a sun going dark before a reckoning. And he didn't have a telescope. He had a plague of locusts, a ruined harvest, and a sentence that has outlived every empire that came after him. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. That's Joel. Chapter 2, verse 31. Written roughly 2,500 years before anyone could calculate a Saros cycle. Hold that verse. We're coming back to it. Joel wasn't the only one who wrote it down. 6 chapters into the book of Revelation, there's a scene most people only remember in fragments. Seals breaking open, one after another, each one releasing something onto the earth. War, famine, death riding a pale horse. And then the 6th seal breaks, and the sky itself is what tears. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. Sackcloth, not just dark. The specific dull, ash-colored black of the material people wore when they were mourning. John, writing on a rock in exile on Patmos, was reaching for a word that meant grief before he was reaching for a word that meant eclipse, because to him, that's what a vanished sun looked like. It looked like the sky itself was in mourning. Now, here's the part that should actually unsettle you, because it isn't in Revelation, it's in the Talmud. Tractate Sukkah, page 29. Rabbis writing centuries before telescopes existed, discussing what it means when the sun goes dark in the middle of the day. Their conclusion: a solar eclipse is a bad omen for the nations of the world. Not for Israel specifically, for the nations, for the world at large. The ones outside the covenant, the ones who don't know they're being watched. A lunar eclipse, in that same passage, is read as an omen for Israel. 2 different lights, 2 different warnings, written down independently of Revelation in a completely different tradition, by men who never met John of Patmos and never read his book. and they landed on the same idea. The sun going dark is a message aimed outward, at the nations, at the world stage. Sit with that for a second, because we are one page away from the nations. Notice something about that Revelation passage too. It isn't just the sky that reacts. It's the powerful. Kings, chief captains, mighty men, the people who run things. The verse doesn't say the poor hid in caves. It says the men who sit at the head of the table, the ones who believe they are the ones steering history, are the ones who run for cover first. Because when the sky stops behaving the way the sky has always behaved, even the people holding all the maps realize, for one instant, that they were never the ones actually in control of the clock. That's not a metaphor invented for a sermon. Watch how the powerful of this world behave the instant something they cannot schedule, cannot negotiate, and cannot bomb into submission shows up over their heads. They go quiet. They issue a statement, and they go back to their war rooms faster than anyone is watching. History already has the receipts on this, and none of them come from a pulpit. In 585 BC, according to Herodotus, the Lydians and the Medes had been at war for 6 straight years, grinding through Asia Minor with no end in sight. Then, in the middle of a pitched battle, the sky went dark in the afternoon. Both armies stopped fighting, not paused, stopped permanently on the spot, and signed a peace that day. Historians can date that eclipse to the exact afternoon because the mathematics of it are recoverable. The war didn't end because someone won. It ended because the sun disappeared and 2 kings decided they didn't want to find out what came next. In 413 BC, the Athenian general Niceas had his entire army camped outside Syracuse, his fleet trapped in the harbor, his campaign already collapsing. He gave the order to retreat by night, the one move that might have saved what was left of his men. Then the moon went dark. His soldiers, terrified, refused to move. Nicias, reading the omen the same way his men did, delayed the retreat by nearly a month, waiting for the sky to clear and the priests to bless a new date. In that month, the enemy sealed every exit. The entire Athenian expedition was annihilated, one of the great military disasters of the ancient world, and the historians who recorded it, Thucydides among them, all agree on the hinge it turned on. A dark sky, and men who ruled empires, but still froze when the light went out. Different sky, different century, same reflex. The people who believe they are steering history keep discovering, one dark sky at a time, that they aren't the ones holding the wheel. That's not a metaphor invented for a sermon. Watch how the powerful of this world behave the instant something they cannot schedule, cannot negotiate, and cannot bomb into submission shows up over their heads. They go quiet. They issue a statement, and they go back to their war rooms faster than anyone is watching. Because here's the truth underneath the poetry. The 6th seal isn't describing a single afternoon. It's describing a pattern. Sky goes dark. Kings tremble for a moment. Kings return to their table. And their table, this particular August, happens to be very, very busy. While the shadow was still finishing its crossing of northern Spain, delegations from 32 nations were packing up their briefing books in Ankara. Having just closed out the largest rearmament pledge the alliance has made in decades, tens of billions committed for the year, troop postures reshuffled, an entire continent quietly repositioning for a war that refuses to end on schedule. 2,000 miles east of that room, tankers were still rerouting around a strait that keeps almost closing and never quite does. This is not a hypothetical for a future chapter. This was the same week, the same sky, The sun didn't just go dark over fishing villages and cathedral towns. It went dark over a map that is already on fire in 4 places at once. We need to look at that map directly, because the pattern Joel and John and the rabbis in Sukkah were pointing at doesn't stay in the sky for long. It comes down to the ground. Here's the map, as it actually stands the week the sky went dark. In the Persian Gulf, a war that opened in late February has never fully closed. A ceasefire framework got signed in June. It gave everyone 60 days to believe it might hold, and then collapsed in July after strikes on commercial shipping that had nothing to do with any battlefield. The Strait of Hormuz, the one corridor through which 1/5 of the world's oil has to pass, whether anyone likes it or not, has spent the summer opening and closing like a valve nobody fully controls. And fuel shortages are already showing up on the other side of the planet because of it. In Eastern Europe, the war that was supposed to be over by now enters its 5th year, with both sides escalating rather than tiring. Kyiv absorbed one of the largest ballistic barrages of the entire war this July. Russian refineries, in turn, are burning at a pace that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago, because Ukraine has learned to reach further with drones than anyone predicted. And the alliance built specifically to contain this kind of war just finished its annual summit in Ankara, committing the largest rearmament package in its history and rebuilding a mission it thought it had retired after the Cold War. Read that list again slowly, because that is not a list of unrelated headlines. That is 4 fronts on 3 continents, all active in the same calendar week. A Gulf that won't stay quiet, a European war grinding into its 5th year, an alliance rearming at wartime pace, and a shipping lane the entire global economy depends on. Opening and closing like a valve nobody fully controls. There's a verse for this. It isn't subtle, and it wasn't written for a war room. Multitudes. Multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. Joel again, same book, 1 chapter later than the Eclipse verse. Chapter 3. The prophet isn't describing a metaphorical crowd. He's describing nations, gathered, summoned, almost against their own will, into one place at one time. For one confrontation they didn't fully choose and can no longer avoid. 32 nations in a conference room in Ankara is not the valley of decision. Let's be precise about that. Nobody is claiming a single summit is the Battle of Armageddon with a translator and a coffee break. But it is a rehearsal of the same shape. Blocks forming, lines hardening. Every major power on Earth quietly deciding this year which side of which line it intends to stand on when the larger gathering finally comes. The valley doesn't fill all at once. It fills nation by nation, summit by summit, pledge by pledge, exactly the way it's filling right now. And this is where the pattern stops being about one eclipse and starts being about a rhythm that keeps repeating. Some of you already know where this is going, because you lived through the last time people noticed it. Between 2014 and 2015, 4 consecutive lunar eclipses fell on Jewish feast days. Passover, Tabernacles, Passover again, Tabernacles again, a configuration astronomers call a tetrad. Rare enough that it hadn't happened on that particular set of feasts in 5 centuries. A previous tetrad, in 1967 and 1968, bracketed the 6-day war, when Jerusalem changed hands for the first time in 2,000 years. The one before that, in 1949 and 1950, bracketed the birth of the modern state of Israel itself. Nobody is claiming the moon caused any of those wars. What's being pointed out is narrower and harder to dismiss. The sky has a documented habit of marking the year's history, turns its hardest corners, whether or not anyone was watching for it. Scripture has a name for this rhythm, and it isn't coincidence. It's birth pains. The phrase shows up in Matthew 24. In the same conversation where the disciples asked Jesus privately, what sign would mark the approach of the end of the age? His answer isn't a single dramatic event. It's an accumulating pattern. Wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, earthquakes in various places. And then the line that matters most. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Not the end. The beginning. Contractions before a birth get closer together and harder to ignore the nearer the birth gets. That is the entire structure of the warning. Not one earthquake, a pattern of earthquakes. Not one war, a pattern of wars. Not one dark sky, a pattern of dark skies arriving closer together over a map that is catching fire in more places at once than it was a decade ago. Look at what just happened. Lined up in order. A war in the Gulf that keeps refusing to end on schedule. A war in Europe that keeps escalating instead of exhausting itself. An alliance rearming at a pace it hasn't used since the actual Cold War. A shipping choke point the whole global economy depends on, opening and shutting like a valve nobody fully controls. And over the top of all four of them, on the same week, in the middle of the afternoon, the sun went dark for the first time over mainland Europe in 27 years. 2 days before the calendar itself turns toward its most solemn season. Nobody needs to tell you those contractions are getting closer together. You already feel it. That's the part nobody talks about on the news. It's not new information. It's a feeling you've been carrying around for longer than you've had words for it. And tonight, it just got a name. So let's be honest about what this actually is and what it isn't. It isn't a date. Nobody watching that sky go dark over Zaragoza gets to walk away with a countdown clock and a number to circle on a calendar. Every generation that has tried that has been wrong. And every generation that keeps trying will keep being wrong. Because that was never the assignment. Joel didn't hand his people a date. He handed them a posture. Rend your heart and not your garments. Not a performance of alarm. A change underneath where nobody else can see it. That's the part almost everyone skips on their way to the fear. Because the fear is the easy part. The fear is free. Anyone can watch a war escalate on 4 continents and a sky go black for the first time in 27 years and feel afraid. That takes nothing from you. What takes something from you, what the sun going dark was actually built to ask of you, is the quieter question underneath the spectacle. Not, when does this end? But, am I ready if it ends tonight? Not ready in the sense of a bunker or a plan or 3 months of supplies in a garage. Ready in the sense Elul was always built for. The king in the field. Approachable before the courtroom season opens. That's not a metaphor built for a sermon either. It's an open door, and open doors close. You don't need the next war to start to walk through it. You don't need Hormuz to shut for good, or Kiev to fall, or the next tetrad to line up on the next feast. The door Elul describes isn't waiting on the next headline. It's open right now, tonight, for you, whether or not another eclipse ever crosses another cathedral town. So make your peace before the sky asks you to. Not because a preacher told you to be afraid, because for 2 minutes and 18 seconds, on the 12th of August, the thing that has never once failed to rise in your entire life went dark in the middle of the afternoon. And somewhere, 32 nations were signing a war pact under a sky that hadn't gone dark yet. That was never a coincidence. It was a signature. And signatures don't need your permission to be real. If this reached something in you tonight, don't let it end here. Follow this channel, because the pattern doesn't stop with one eclipse, and neither will we. Send this to 5 people who need to hear it before they see the next headline. Not to frighten them, to prepare them. Leave a comment and be honest in it. Tell me what actually landed, and tell me what you want unpacked next, because the next sign is already on its way, whether or not any of us are watching for it. The sun already told you what time it is. The only question left is whether you're ready for the hour that follows.